Aloha. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited because this is a great opportunity to delve into the mind of a station relations person. They're very elusive and exclusive in the PBS system. And actually, I started in 2009 at PIC, and I met Gabriella on the very first conference I went to, at the very first luncheon that I walked into and went, I don't know a soul here. And she looked up and waved and said, I have a seat right here. And I sat next to her. And I got to find out, which is what a lot of you will find out today, what she does and why it's important and why we are so happy that she's here to share it with you. And it's really funny because when we started our first series, Pacific Heartbeat, we had to look for a station relations person, and then I put out requests for proposals, and Gabriella was one of the ones that applied. And she, not only did I remember what a great person she was, but she also was willing to work with us. Like, whatever you need, if this is too much, we'll change things up. And she really worked with what we could afford, what we were looking for. So when our second series that we co-produced, Family Ingredients, came up, again, we have to put out requests for proposals, but Gabriella was one of the first to apply. And also, I did, you don't know this, I did my own little.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, I did my own little calling around to
sure.
Different programmers. And I said, send me the top 3 people, station relations people that you love to work on. And how many did I say? 10? I sent it to?
Yeah.
Actually, no, I sent it to 5. 5 didn't respond.
Oops.
All 5 had Gabriella in her top 3.
Oh.
Yeah, and pretty high up there. So I knew we were making the right decision again, and I'm very happy to have her here. We caught her on her tail end of her Kona vacation.
Oh, smart.
So now she's
I'm very relaxed.
She'll talk slower so we can understand her English accent. And without further ado, Gabriella.
Thank you. Thanks. So I think I'll probably stand over here. Well, that's a lot to live up to right there. So I put together a presentation just to make it a little easier to have some reference points rather than me just talk at you. But feel free to jump in whenever. It's just, it's very informal. And what I thought I'd do is start with the big picture of public television because it's just it's its own animal. And I know some people are familiar in the room with public television and how it operates, and others aren't. So I'll just start with the big picture, and then I'm going to kind of work down to what stations are like, and then as to what I do in my role and how I work with producers in the community. So anyway, so a brief, I was born and raised in London. I worked in print media, and I came to the US in 1994. I did the romance thing. And I thought, I'll come for a couple of years to Portland. Where's that? Portland, Oregon. And then I never left. I was fortunate enough to start working at Oregon Public Broadcasting. I was really interested in media, and there weren't many opportunities at the time in that area. And I just kind of went in on an informal interview, and it started from there. And the producer, the head of production at the time, John Lindsay, I don't know if John might know him, was doing more and more international co-productions, and said, are you interested in kind of helping us navigate the system? And so that's why I ended up there for several years doing that, and it was really fun, and I loved it. But then I had my first son, and I thought, I don't want to travel so much overseas, and I kind of regrouped and took some time off, actually about 6 months, and then American Public Television, who I'll go on to, approached me and said, are you interested in station relations, because it's US bound. It's basically what you've been doing, which is pitching ideas and working with producers, but within the public television system itself. And I said, that sounds fascinating, yeah. So that's how kind of it started. So basically, to get your projects out into the system, there's distributors. So your signal will come down through several main sources. These are the main ones, obviously PBS Plus take on projects, which they then feed out to the system. American Public Television, who I just mentioned, are another distribution service that you might not even realize that a lot of the content you see is actually APT content as well. And then National Education and Telecommunications Association, another tier. And then we put the World Channel in here because they do take on directly content, but it's not as traditional as these others, but just kind of put it in there because it's something that might kind of gel with you. So once you kind of decide that there's a kind of understanding that there's a distribution entity out there, a lot of people partner up. They have a presenting partner which helps them present their project to the distributor, but also to the system. So you can have a presenting station, so that could be any, a lot of the stations in the US on the mainland, so KQED, WTTW, a lot of stations will work with producers and presenting and packaging their shows for them. And also, obviously, minority consortiums, they help producers pitch their idea to these distributors and also how to package and get your production out there. And then some people go self-presented, so they work directly with these entities and also just trying to get their project out. So, and we can go into just talk about the different tiers if you want a little bit more when we go back, if it makes more sense. So the actual television PBS system, there's 350 member stations that are located all around the US. And so the DMAs, the designated areas, are what show, they have given certain percentages. So New York's over 6% coverage if you get into New York, for example. And then each, so you go from New York right down to Puerto Rico and San Juan. So these are the kind of structures, just to give you an idea of how many stations there are out there. And the idea where I'm coming from with this is that each station schedules individually. So PBS Hawaii's schedule is not going to look like OPB's schedule. It's not going to look like New York's schedule. Certain elements of it are going to look the same, though, because they're coming down directly from PBS and the MPS system. So within the stations, for example, like in New York, you'll have a primary station, and then they'll have sub-channels. So your project, if you're looking for a place for it, it could be potentially on your primary, or where do you want your project to be, and how do you get your project on one of these channels within the channels. So does that make sense? Is this too convoluted? I don't want to, it's very complicated and it's hard to make it. So, and for example, in LA, so LA, the main station in LA is PBS SoCal. There's other LA stations that are in that same DMA, but they are the main station. And within that station, there's sub-channels. So, and how do you get onto those different channels? So then I kind of went on to say, so you've got your project, you've got a partner, you've got a distributor, and you want to try and get it on the schedule. So how does that look? So the schedules are already pretty much in place as far as certain blocks are taken up. So, there's kids that are going to run in the morning, and it's an FCC regulation that the main stations have to air at least 7 hours of kids programming on their main channels. So that's taken up a lot of real estate. So, and then they have an afternoon block traditionally. So traditionally there's some opening strips, Monday through Friday. You can get those mid-morning, and that'd be a way to squeeze in a project potentially. And then prime time, pretty much from 7 p.m. almost up to 11 p.m. for the main primary stations, their flagship stations. Those hours are taken up because they have to carry that content, this prime time content. So how do you work around that? Well, you have some flexibilities. Thursdays evenings are traditionally a little bit more open. People will schedule, stations will schedule their own local series or their, art shows or whatever, and, also look for outside documentaries and strands that they can put in. And same with sometimes on Tuesday evenings, it changes from month to month, but prime time could finish at 10:30. So that's for your flagship station, but then you have your substation that has a little bit more flexibility because they don't have to comply by these mass carry prime time allotments. So the idea is what I'm trying to show here, even though I know I'm going into detail if this is too detailed, is that it seems like a huge amount of time, right? But really what you're fighting for is you're fighting for real estate. And how do you get your program noticed and within those certain blocks, knowing where there might be some wiggle room, knowing individual schedules and where you can potentially, find a fit. So that's basically the role, then that comes to the role of a station relations person. So specifically what we focus on is basically doing that, trying to pitch but position your project within their schedules. We're your advocate. As Leanne says, there's several of us out there. There's probably about 10, I'd say, station relations people that do this in the system. And we're kind of known for doing this. We've been doing it for a long time. So programmers tend to take our calls, which is very nice of them. And they understand. We know how to talk to them about how to pitch your program, where it might fit, and take away some of the layers and make it not so personal too, because obviously producers put a lot into their projects, which I totally understand, but sometimes the messaging doesn't come across with why you should schedule it. So that's basically what we do, and then we have these direct contacts and relationships. We know where the opportunities might lie, or be able to talk about where the opportunities might lie, and then to focus in on the best places for your project. The other thing I say is that we're advocates for your project, and we understand some of the programmers' market, but at the end of the day, they know their viewers the best. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's just not, unfortunately, it's just not going to gel. It's not going to work, and you have to respect that, and it's really hard. But then you find another way. Well, okay, it's not going to work on this station because it's just not a right fit. There isn't the real estate. Maybe there's a way. Oh, there's another Chicago station. Maybe it would fit better there. And just thinking outside the box a little bit, and respecting the fact that programmers do really know their viewers. And so it's just it's a navigation, as it were. So that's what I actually went on to say. The other thing is to think about when you have your project. Think about, do you have any hooks, marketing hooks? Why would a certain month might be better releasing? So there's another added reason. The more reasons you can give for your content to be timely, to be on point. It could be any kind of obviously we do a lot around Asian American Pacific Heritage Month, but there's other things out there. There's other awareness months, or Earth Day. Just thinking of other ways to hook them in so that it gives the programmer a theme to hook your project around, because then they might be doing several of those kinds of projects in that month, rather than having to drop something in. Your viewers watching, and then all of a sudden there's a documentary on what, then they're losing viewers. So you want to help them retain viewers, because that's where they, ultimately those are the givers, they donate. And so, and then also just long-term strategies, thinking about if you have a series, thinking about long-term, what do you want your series to represent? Just getting that, really thinking about some of those message points, developing a brand. So when you go out and pitch it, you're not just pitching a cooking series. Why this cooking series? What's so unique about it? And just thinking about ahead of time when you even start planting those seeds to build a brand. And it's sometimes easy if you have a host or talent that's very charismatic, or that people can relate to. That's an easy way to kind of get buy-in, is by having a host that you get one-on-one time with programmers. But we'll talk about that too. Oops, I went too. So, we also help you with the nuts and bolts, like making sure that everything's in place so we can make it as easy as possible for programmers to actually schedule your program. So it's in the system where it needs to be. They work on certain software. They look for certain postings. And so we work directly with your distributor and your partner to make sure the timing's right, and we push that a lot, so that programmers can easily book and schedule your series, because if it's not in the system in a certain way, then it can be overlooked, and then you're competing with so many projects that you don't want just to be overlooked. And we also, if you have certain documentaries have a lot of outreach potential and screenings and things like that, we can help. We don't specifically do that, but what we do is we help get the kind of circle going. So we'll say, this is happening in your community, this might be a great time to schedule it, and then one works off the other. It's kind of a circular thing. So we try and help as much as we can with getting that information to programmers and the stations. So I was just going to say, so these are a couple of sample projects I've worked with PIC. So we released season 1 of Pacific Heartbeat in May 2012, and very excited that it's season 6. Here we are. So, this is the distribution partner is APT, so it goes out, it's fed out through American Public Television, and it's a free program through Exchange, and obviously with PIC and PBS Hawaii and CPB and all partners in this series. And that's been a really, again, Leanne and PIC have worked really hard to create a brand. People look for it, have been wanting to know about it. They ask us each year, when is it, what's the new season about? So we're just building brand and awareness. What's our thing? What's the core element, which is telling stories of Pacific Islanders and why it's important, and how their stories are unique, but also everyone can relate to them because they're, at certain touch points. So this is the new season coming out. So, and then the other is Family Ingredients. So that is cooking cultural, so it's not a traditional cooking series by any means, and that's distributed by PBS Plus. And so that was just released last year, the first season. So we worked really hard to, try and communicate what the series is about. And so that sounds really, but you see, when you're pitching, you've only sometimes got 2 or 3 minutes, 1, 2, 3 minutes. So you really have to, understand what the concept is and relaying that to programmers so they want to schedule your show. And the other thing that the producers worked on, add to the PBS meeting. So programmers got the opportunity on a small kind of function to meet Ed personally, because that's, that helps bring a personal touch to the series, and that's the connection. And so that went really well, and it was so. And then we just continue to build on the brand and and evolve in that. So, and then again, timing-wise, we're going for an October release this year, and we've kind of discussed it, and we talked about what the pros and cons were and why October. So just really being strategic, but this is kind of a typical cycle. So a producer or a partner, or the together, will come to you and say their project has been accepted. They've got a project. It's been accepted by, it's going to be, fed out through PBS, APT, or NETA, and they have this partner in place. And now we want someone, we've got our idea, we've got our concept, we need someone to go out there and pitch it for us and try and get carriage, as much carriage as possible for this series. So usually the best way to do that is with at least a 4-month cycle, because programmers, 4 months from your release date, because programmers schedule anywhere from 3 months right to a month before, and they all vary, and it's just dependent also on the particular project, how they fill those specific slots in. And so what will happen is, ideally in the 4th month out, I'll kind of work with that producer and partner about what materials we have, what's going to be ready to go, that 3 month out, do you have a screener that's completed? People can't schedule you if they don't see your content, right? I mean, you might go familiar, but you really need, ideally, the more you have, the better positioned you'll be. So close as possible to a finished film, episode really helps, because sometimes you're only going to get a one shot because they got this big pile, and so you want to put your best foot forward. So that's ideal. There's always the ideals, and then you kind of can work around, because sometimes things, happen. One sheet, the basics of having your idea and what's your outline of your show or your episode descriptions, press release, images, so that we can post those to these offer pages where they'll be posted, and then stations can pull those down. So knowing that you have these materials in place, and then the other production and promotional deliverables such as promos, trailers, postcards, social media posts, and everything. And I want to be fully clear too that I don't actually produce these. That's something that the producer produces and usually has. I will provide guidance on language and review copy and review design, but I don't actually physically do any of that. So that's something that often too, I think, is, obviously you need a freelancer or whoever, or you might have, depending on the size of your company, you may be able to do that. So it's something to keep in mind, though, that if you don't have some of these basic materials, it's going to be hard for you to be pitched and to get in front of someone. And then so you produce your offer materials, and what we used to traditionally do mailings, but no one uses screeners anymore, so we do a screening link, so 4 months out, we'll send out a screening link, and it will come from me, and it's basically, an e-card that's advocating your series or doc, explaining it, some basic information, how the programmer can pick it up, when it's going to be fed, just some of the main things that they look for, and that goes out, and then ideally just kind of towards the tail end of that 4-month lead time, and then basically I start calling. So that's going to be your the one-on-one call-in, the one-on-one emailing is what helps get the project kind of moving forward with programmers, and that's going to be a continuous cycle of checking in with people, trying to get hold of them, or and just going back and forth with them and explaining something that have questions. Or so it's important that your station relations person knows your project and understands your project, that they've watched it. Saying that, just really make sure that they understand what your goals are, and what you envisaged your story was about. I think it's really important to be able to communicate that. So there's other options too, and ways to kind of promote your show within the system. There's Current online. There's Current. I don't know if you've been to current.org. It's a trade magazine. Well, it's a newspaper. It comes out once a month, and there's an online version and a physical paper version. And it's actually really good for anyone to read that's in the industry, because then you know what's going on, and you can advertise there online or in print just to get some exposure. I still suggest, if you trying to do something physical, doesn't have to be the screening thing. It can be something really easy, like a postcard that you can stagger. Just getting something printed in the mail, because we don't really get that much mail anymore. So just something tangible that they can put in a file, or just another way of getting in front of them. So that's another easy way. And then what I'll be doing for you too at this point is I'll be reporting back on feedback, what people are saying, who I've got hold of, whether they're considering your project, whether they said no way, or yes, I'm interested. And as we lead further in towards your release month, then you'll start getting more carriage information, which I will share with you. And at that point, you can also sometimes we send out a feed reminder, so programmers don't miss the feed, or their traffic folks don't miss the feed. Canvas calls are continuing, emails are continuing, along with my reporting. And in the release month, then basically it's the wrap-up calls. You also suggest and recommend, a lot of partners have access to track media, but if your partner doesn't, it's good to enlist track media. And track media is, they work with Nielsen, so you will be able to see your carriage. So you can go in and look at where your carriage is, because then you can see everyone that's airing it, but it's only got a 2-week lead time. But that way you get a really good snapshot of what's happening, because I'm only going to get so much feedback, and you know what happens after your release month. You might want to keep gauging where your carriage is, and so you'll be able to do that independently if you do that, if you enlist track. And you track, there's 3-month contracts, 6-month contracts, and year contracts. But so that's a really good tool just to kind of gauge what's going on with your project carriage-wise. And then the other thing I was going to mention was, you know, I did mention about thinking about if you have timing, if there's certain events coming up, is it a good idea for you to invest in being at these events, these conferences? There's APT4 Marketplace, so that's the one distributor, and they meet in November. And so you know, there's a variety of opportunities there. You can get a booth, you can do a tote bag insert, you can do, there's a whole gamut range depending on what you can do. A lunch, you can do, you know, it's up to you. And then there's PTPA, which is the Programmers Association. They have a small meeting in September, and then they do a pre-PBS meeting in May, and that's what we did last year with Family Ingredients. We did a little reception at the pre-PBS meeting. And then, of course, PBS in May, so that's an opportunity to do little side events, because obviously PBS is attended by, I think, probably 1,500 people, so you don't want to do that's a big commitment of time and money. But if you wanted to do, you know, a dinner, or you know, tagging it on to the PTPA meeting and just being around, it's a great way to get visibility, and especially with like a host or talent like with Ed, just being around on and off, it's nice for people to have that connection there. And I think, so my top 3 takeaways are to try and really pick a good release month for your project. Really think about why and when, you know, your content and what's going on the calendar, or just generally. And then, you know, allow yourself enough lead time. I think it sounds easy, but being ready 4 months out can be a challenge. I realize that when you're producing and filming, but keep that in mind. And then, have all your materials ready to go. I just think that it's good to put your best foot forward. That's what I tell producers. So yes, we can send out this 2-minute rough cut, but is that the impression you want to give? You know, so just thinking about that, and trying to be as polished and as looking as professional as possible, and that you've, you know, it will really pay off. So that's just my little spiel there. So I hope that was helpful.
Very, yes, yes.